Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. You know you are welcome anytime. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 22nd Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. We're here to grow in our journey together. I'm Milan Starcic, and this is my co-host Shannon. We're two souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Shannon and I are going to do a journey through the steps together. So today's topic is step one. Can you share this step and what it means to you, Shannon?
Yes, admitted we were powerless over alcohol, and as a result, our lives had become unmanageable. So for me, that means I have no power of choice when it comes to mind-altering substances, right? I'll say drugs and alcohol. We can count alcohol being a drug, so maybe just for simplicity, I'll just use the term drugs. Yeah, it means once I start, I can't stop, and as soon as I've stopped, all I can think about is starting again, right? And I'm willing to put anyone aside to use, right? I'm obsessed with the effects given by alcohol and drugs, and I'm willing to go to any lengths to use them.
And what about unmanageability in there?
Yeah, so that's unmanageability right there, right? But all responsibilities go out the window, right? I become selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, like to my absolute core, right? Say I have a big responsibility coming up, right? If I'm using, that all goes out the window, right? Those plans are canceled. I need to show up for somebody. Chances are I'm not going to be there. And if I am, I'm intoxicated, right? Really, I just live solely for me and at the mercy of my addiction. And that's in a nutshell, really what the unmanageability looks like. We'll branch off and talk a little bit more about, case scenarios, but yeah, alcohol and drugs run the show and everything else takes a back seat.
I was listening to a speaker tape, as I often do here and there, and my very favorite description of this, the speaker said, at the end of World War II, the U.S. had dropped one nuclear bomb on Japan. You know, tens of thousands of people died. Huge devastation, like it never happened from one single weapon in the history of mankind. And even at that point, Japan was still trying to negotiate its surrender. And the United States would accept nothing but unconditional surrender. So it took them dropping another bomb and another 100,000 people dying in order for them to admit complete defeat. And the speaker likened it to how many bombs have to go off in your life before you admit complete defeat. And that analogy has just stuck with me because I can think of like a series of tragic moments over the 17 years where I would say that I fought my powerlessness, where I believed I had a certain element of control. And for me, it was a long time coming. Some people don't even aren't even as addicted as long as that stage of my addiction.
That word powerlessness kept me sick for a really long time because I just wasn't willing to accept it, right? I viewed it as I was weak. I should be able to figure this out. I'm responsible. I have a good grip on reality in all other areas of my life. This one shouldn't be any different. Like I'm going to make this work, right? I'm going to be able to control my drinking, or at least more than anything, control the outcomes that come with it. You know, um, the insanity of taking that first drink though and thinking that it's going to be different anytime when it's never been, and I have a proven track record of it, right? Just shows like the level of sickness and how that really only occurs in us who are addicts or alcoholics. But yeah, I fought that tooth and nail and it kept me sick for a long time. And really all it is admission. I can do anything in this world. I just can't do drugs and alcohol. Um, and expect to have a beautiful life, that's for sure.
And so, in terms of step one,
Mhm.
they say that it is the only step that you have to be 100% on. And I've certainly seen evidence of this in people relapsing. And, there's a lot of people who say that relapses are part of their story. And I'm not saying this to offend anybody. I am just merely an observer of what I'm
Yeah.
watching inside people and from my own experience. So when I was talking about 17 years of not admitting I was powerless, the first 20 years of my addiction, I didn't really even acknowledge that there could have potentially been a problem. From 15 to 35, I just thought everything was great until, a couple things started happening where I was maybe hurting somebody I love or just acting in a definite duality of honesty, pretending I'm honest, or, multiple things. And at that point, that was when I tried to control my habits. And this led to series of white knuckling. And white knuckling is when you're straight but you're not running any sort of program for spiritual experience or relief. It went from white knuckling to dissatisfaction to failure and an embarrassing event again and again until it led to my heart stopping. And that was a point where I definitely 100% felt powerless and admitted defeat. And certainly my life was unmanageable at that point. And so I'd like maybe now, can you tell me how you see honesty and open mindedness playing a role inside this taking this first step for somebody who's coming into the program?
Mhm. So yeah, you mentioned relapse, and how that's part of some people's stories, right? It's like heard before, relapse is a part of recovery. Well, not really. It's a lack of recovery, right? And I'm speaking on that from my own personal experience. And like, who really wants to admit defeat in any aspect of their life, right? Like to say, oh, I can't do that, or, I'm powerless over this, or I have no control over that, right? It feels kind of icky inside for those of us that do have control complexes as well, right? So that honesty is first and foremost, I have to be honest with my innermost self, right? Before I'm even honest with anybody else, because we're really good at telling people what they want to hear, right? So I have to admit to me first and foremost, I have a problem with drugs and alcohol, period. I'm never going to get better over any consecutive period of time. The only option for me is complete abstinence. And today I can admit that, but that took a long time. And then I need to be open minded to the fact that there is something out there that's going to be bigger than my addiction, that's going to help me live without constantly going back to succumbing to my addiction. And we talked about that last week or on our first podcast, right? On that higher power piece. So I come in, I'm honest with me. I'm an alcoholic through and through. I say that I can hold myself accountable to other people in this program and to my family and friends. And I'm honest with my higher power. And now I'm open minded to doing the work to not have to keep going back to that same place, that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization that addiction takes us to.
Awesome. I love that. And like for myself, that 17-year period, there was no honesty. Like, and there was no ability until further step work for me to look through the delusions. I'm not sure if I mentioned it to you, but recently I did this meditation and it was called the Four Pebbles. Uh, and it talks about one of the stages is about being like water. And whether it's through our addiction or fear or anger or some other state, when our water is not smooth, we can not see the world as it is, nor can we reflect it clearly back to have a response to it that should be inside our real person, like and dealing with reality. And it really, for me, waking up from that evening where, like my heart had stopped and I woke up and I was in my friend's daughter's apartment. I didn't know where I was. But there was a feeling of relief that it was like that admission of powerlessness is like almost like an orgasmic sigh, like an ah, like that's over. Like I don't have to fight or pretend that anymore, because it if honesty is kind of like the very first step in this program, you know, like honesty and the first step to me are like you have to be honest going into that. And open-mindedness, rolls into the fact that we have to be open-minded to starting to change everything. Like it's not like, oh, I think I'm gonna kind of change a little bit. Like, they say you can't pick and choose the program. You either take the suggestions or you don't. And they say that people don't fail when they follow it thoroughly. They're not like, hey, lackadaisical following will lead to relief from addiction.
No. No, and if I can't even be honest that I have a problem and that I can't fix myself on my own, how the heck am I going to be honest about the damage that I've caused in my life? How the heck am I going to take accountability, right?
Yeah.
How am I going to become teachable or be open-minded in the sense of receiving information from a sponsor or from other people in our program? Like that's going to go out the window.
And so now, do you have a question you want to bring up? And we'll kind of just keep going back and forth here.
Sure, I do, but I just want to add one thing too that you
Sure.
touched on about um relapse and recovery. Sometimes when I'm sitting in, meetings, I hear like fellowship talking, right? And someone's relapsed, and the question gets posed to them is, why do you think you relapsed? And, resentment or took my will back or this. Really, what it comes down to is you didn't have a firm grasp on step one. There was somewhere deep seated that you thought that you could possibly drink again or you could pick up again. That's really what it comes down to, right? As soon as we start to think that way again, we're already off to the races. So I love what that you said, step one's the only one you have to fully get. I think we have to fully get all of them, but this is where you're really gonna take that plane off the tarmac. So
Well,
you gotta
so
be
now before we
buckled up with that one.
I think you just touched on something. So before I get you to ask a question, I'm going to just keep rolling on this. But can you explain what reservations are to you and how they keep someone from 100% admission of powerlessness? Because I feel like you've just touched on that. And we might as well kind of ride that one out right now.
Sure.
And yeah, go for it. And then I'll go.
So this is gonna sound funny to anybody listening who isn't one of us when I say this. Here's a reservation. I had an 18-year alcohol and drug career before my first rehab. Okay. 99% of that time was oblivion. One time, and I can remember this crystal clear. I remember where I was, the table that I was sitting at, the night of the week that it was. It was a Tuesday. I was feeling slightly under the weather. I only had 2 to 3 beers, I think at most that night. I'm going to say two. And then I went home. That one night was so crystal clear in my mind that I convinced myself for years, well, there was that one time I only had a couple drinks that I wasn't blackout. How could I be an alcoholic? But here I have, 364 days out of a year that I am, and I'll only dial it on that one time. So there's a reservation, right? Biggest reservation growing up was I was too young. I was going to outgrow this. This is what every teenager did, right? I wasn't a daily drinker throughout my whole career. And I had a vision of what an alcoholic looked like. That was a 70-year-old man who couldn't make it through a day without drinking, cirrhosis of the liver. I didn't fit that bill. Therefore, that's not me. I wasn't homeless. Like the list goes on, right? The just real trivial excuses. And maybe mixed into, a whole bunch of disaster, there were some good times. And I would hang on to those, convincing myself that, see, it wasn't all bad. And if I could only just get this science recipe down where I could, have enough to be completely out of my mind, but without causing damage around me, once I could achieve that, then I would have this thing figured out.
There you go, folks.
Silly,
Reservations.
silly
Yeah,
reservations.
reservations are the most common killer that I've seen of the program, and you know, the examples that I've seen be the largest culprits are even the lack of 100% desire to quit. The very thought that you still want to drink or use is a reservation in itself. And so you see the quickest and surefire way to relapse is someone getting forced into the program by a loved one or family member or shit shamed into it from an action that they did. Like if they are not here in the program from their own desire to change, it's that reservation will squash out the program. Another reservation I see is somebody rejecting part of the program. Oh, I don't really like meetings. I find them uncomfortable. Not going to meetings. Boom, reservation. Oh, I'm going to really take my time on the steps. I'm going to be the most thorough step doer ever. So I'll sit on step one for 5 years, and like the reality is for me, I needed to get that step work done or I would not have been able to stay straight. And, other ones really are the lack of admission that you even really have a problem. Just like Shannon, I was like, well, I'm not pushing a shopping cart. I don't need to drink every day. And that was one, like, my sponsor really defined it well to me in the sense that it's like you have the allergy or the disease that you have to consume once you start consuming, but the real insanity of our disease is that inability not to say yes to that first one, even when all the evidence is stacked up that this is going to have a bad ending. And that insanity sitting there and us not admitting that is a reservation. And the problem for me is that I didn't have addiction defined well enough. So I thought it was somebody else's problem, not my problem. Like I thought that okay, I've got a house, I've got a job, I'm not pushing the cart. I can stop for periods of time. But my problem was how many times I said, "Oh, I'll be home after one. I'm just gonna have one." Like the whole controlled drinking experiment they encourage you to do in the big book, I'm like, who could have ever passed that? Like you said you did once. And you know what? Yeah, I did a couple times. There was no joy in it, no lack of obsession, and no like that was satisfying to have one. Having one drink was like fucking torture.
And I put money on it today, though I can't quite remember what, the next 2 days after that one night looked like because my brain allows me to remember the one time where I thought that I'd handled things well. But I put money on it that if we could roll a tape back, I probably ended up getting blackout the following night or at least the night after that, right? Like this wasn't something that I continued. It was one time. And I love what you just said there about I'll be home after one, like that insanity we tell ourselves too. Um, and you touched on some really good points in the reservations and the complete lack of even wanting to fully, right? That's why it's like we have to be completely honest with ourselves. The most dangerous reservation that I forgot to even share, but is what ultimately almost took my life this last time is I had remained sober for an extensive period of time. So there was no way that if I drank again, it would be like it was before, right? I just need to heal my trauma. And then suddenly I'm going to be cured of alcoholism.
And how quickly did you get back to where you had been? Like how
Very,
quickly
very
was it?
quickly.
Was it like boom, not fun? Did some fucked up shit that you're already regretting?
Very quickly. Very, very quickly,
Like
right?
days, weeks, months. I mean, like
The first time I drank after almost 7 years was fine, right? I was hungover for sure, but nothing had gone wrong.
mm,
Um, I think there was another time maybe after that, and then it was immediately like, a 3-day bender type deal. And that's when I was like, "Ooh, I don't think I outgrew this thing." And to lighten the mood a little bit, if you don't mind, I'll tell a quick funny story about
yeah.
this. So here I am, I've given my life to recovery, gotten everything back, beautiful, and then some, I start thinking slowly but surely, I get that sick thinking back that if I drink again, it's never going to be like it was before because I've grown so much, less and less in common with the fellowship, more in common with people in my life that are drinking. So I'm sitting there in my house, and if this isn't the definition of insanity, and I've shared this story a handful of times, and people have just like other alcoholics laugh, right? But non-alcoholics are kind of just like, really, I'm taking a bath, I'm smoking a weed pen, and I'm Googling people who have successfully left Alcoholics Anonymous and cured their alcoholism. So before I've even picked up a drink, I'm already trying to, yes,
Rationalize.
scratch that itch with with weed, which has never been my forte, or never been a drug of choice to say. And here I am stoned Googling this, and I can't find any examples. But the more I scroll, because the session's going, I'm going to figure this out. I come across like one Reddit entry of someone who, drank again after years of being sober, and they never went back to alcoholic drinking. Well, they weren't an alcoholic to begin with, right? We don't get that choice. And I didn't want to just have a glass of wine with dinner. I wanted to go back to the effects produced without the consequences. So it's like that insanity right there, like what I was willing to give up just for that hit again. And in my mind, I never even thought I'd lose anything again.
Well, and I think one thing that was pointed out to me also from my sponsor is that someone can be a heavy drinker that develops a habit, but once that habit is broken, they can actually stop drinking and not have that insanity of taking that first drink anymore. So, there's that category that sometimes gets lumped into alcoholic only because they might be, you know, a regular drinker by circumstance, more so than with the obsession of the mind that kind of occurs with addicts and alcoholics.
Yeah, it's limited in our class of drinker and user, right? Um, yeah, I remember seeing that in the literature when I first read it, and I thought, well, that's me. I'm going to become a hard drinker. But you don't just get to become it, because it says right after that, you know, threaten, loss of a loved one or loss of a marriage, or, health crisis, then they can moderate or stop. Not That's not me.
And that's a reservation that neither of us brought up. And I hear it all the time, and it was one of mine beforehand was loss of a loved one. I'm facing life right now with some old parents, a couple with strokes, one with cancer. And, I always had that reservation like, I'm not going to be okay if things aren't okay with my mom. And lucky for me, it was about 2 weeks into being at options. We went to the meeting that we went to at the Colano Club on the Friday nights, and there was a guy, Josh, who had just lost his mom. And part of his share was talking about how proud he was for her to see him clean as she passed, and how he was, really leaning on the community and making it through, and honoring her by staying straight. And I swear it was like he was there that day to dispel that final reservation for me. You know, like it was like a moment where I was like, wow, he could do it. And then there's that lady Kendall, and she shared right after an experience about losing her mom and the same thing happening. And then her husband Dave, and like Kendall and Dave, I think at that time were like 17 years and 20 years clean, each of them. And Dave had talked about losing his mom as well, and how there was kind of really this amazing experience with him and his siblings. And you know, like it wasn't even all entirely sad through the way that they kind of let her go and she let them go. And, you know, it's changed my view completely on what will happen to me in that circumstance because I'm no longer holding on to it as an excuse to leave. Like I'm here and I want to stay here. And so dispelling all my reservations was something that I really realized I needed to do.
Mhm. Well, you know, I was 3 years sober, right, when I lost my stepfather of 20 years, and, you know, I lost my best friend of 19 years, stayed sober through all of that, right? Never even a question to start drinking again. So we can get through, you know, very challenging times of grief and very, very heavy loss, because I remember actually, I was standing out in a meeting is my first month of ever being sober back in 2015. And I met a lady outside of a meeting and she had just lost her daughter. And she said to me, you know, Shannon, if drinking would have brought her back, I would have hit a liquor store that night, but it won't. And if I go back to drinking, I'm not going to honor my daughter. I'm not going to grieve her and I'm not going to mourn the loss. All I'm going to do is postpone it, right? And hurt myself and everyone else in my life as a result. But I never forgot that, right? She said, if it was going to get rid of the pain or my daughter was going to come back, you know, I would have been drunk that night. So there's really no excuse for us to go back to our addiction and justify it on losing someone.
And once you've done the steps, it's impossible to see to pretend that escaping is solving a problem. You know,
Well,
like I used
the
to say, I felt
delusion's
like a
like over,
fool
right?
with no tools in the dark before the steps. And even if I don't remain perfect in my program, I'm going to know forever when I'm full of shit now. There's just no pretending when I know. Like, you know, it was one thing to not understand a lot of my motives and hide behind the delusions of substance. But now, like now I just can't pretend. I cannot pretend that I'm not seeing what I'm doing. You know, I was just talking to somebody about grief inside recovery a couple podcasts ago, and I realized when I was, you know, doing my research for that one and doing it that there was like a major death. I had a friend overdose on January 1st, 2020, and it crippled me for a while. It was probably like my hardest adult loss that I had experienced. But I realized that it's only in the last 14 months inside my recovery that I've actually gained acceptance and processed that grief. And you know, when I'm fucked up and when I was like using it as a catastrophization of my life to as an excuse to prolong be fucked up and dysfunctional, it really was an excuse for that, and it wasn't honoring him at all. Like somebody overdoses and dies, and what do? Fall into months of substance abuse? Like how fucking ridiculous is that? But in my mind, that was like
They
the right
they
thing to do.
die and they leave the world, and again, we make it about us.
Yeah, it's so like self-centered to the extreme.
Mhm.
And you know, and that's another point here is that what role do you see self-centeredness playing in stopping people from a good step one?
Well, you just said it right there, right? You start getting that diseased brain going where, well, if my parents pass, I don't know how I'll get through that sober. It's like we're already setting the stage, pre-planning that
Yeah,
relapse, giving ourselves permission, right?
yeah.
Because it's really not about a healthy way of grief. It's about, I'm going to use this as an excuse to get high again.
Well, and how does that help any of the remaining family? Like, you're not showing any support for them. Like you're not even going to be present. Like I've heard stories of people, inside their addiction where they almost missed their parents' funeral because they were so fucked up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's quite the hangover to wake up with. Could you imagine? Gosh.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would break my heart in retrospect, actually.
Did you want me to speak on the self-centeredness piece, or do you want me to ask you a question?
Ask a question.
Sure. Okay. So I want to talk about the word powerlessness and step one. So you mentioned that you had a hard time with,
Hmm.
admitting complete defeat, and people like you and I, right? We're very career oriented, very driven, we're good in business, we work in sales. So to think that there's something that we can't master is tough. Would you not agree?
100%.
So when you saw that word powerlessness, A, what threw you the most about it? And B, when you run into a situation with a sponsee where they can't quite wrap their head around being powerlessness, being powerless, how do you walk them through that? Like, what are the tools that you use to help it make sense to them? Because I know I just shared that, I challenged that for so long.
So, first of all, for me, it was an unknowing lack of admission of defeat for me because by the time I came into options, I was defeated. So when I finally entered the program, like I was so ready to say, "Fuck, it's over." Like, so that was really fortuitous for me. Like I was super lucky to come in so defeated, the gift of desperation. But there's that chapter more on alcoholism where it's like, I'm only going to drink cocktails, I'm only going to drink beer, I'm only drinking on weekends, I'm only drinking after a vacation, I'm only drinking not on vacations. And it rambles through all these circumstances. And there was almost every single one of those that I tried, except for drink like a gentleman. I was like, I'm never going to be a gentleman, but but like I literally had controlled days, controlled events. And it never worked because I was still had the obsession in my mind. And I still would cycle, and my mental space would still be there. And then the other part of my brain was used for resenting you for quitting for you because I wasn't quitting for me. And I really do believe that if you don't want to quit, that's the biggest killer of a reservation. You know, I'm working with some people where, like right now, right now, their desire to still use is apparent, and I can see it as a reservation. I can't change anybody in any way. Like people, places, or things, we can't change. But I can tell them what my 17 years was like fighting it. You know, it has to be complete, and you have to be willing to just put down that mental energy because until you admit your powerlessness, like then you're sitting inside that mental cycle, and that mental cycle for me was never going to set me free. Like I would be like, okay, I'm straight. Oh, look at that person drinking. Oh, that looks good. I can't wait till next weekend when it's going to be my turn to drink like that. Oh yeah, and it would just like gallop like a horse. And what it did was create an entire straight existence of dissatisfaction because the only moments that I was going to be happy were not now. And it robbed me of any present serenity or joy because I was trapped in either the glorification of my prior using or the anticipation of when I was going to get to cut loose and just go off the rails. And, one thing that I see inside this program is that bringing ourselves to the present moment is the only way that we're not in those other two places, and that is where you're going to find your serenity. It's the only place you're going to find it. You can't have yesterday's serenity, and tomorrow's serenity may not come. You know, I hope that. And now back to you. That question for you.
So beautifully said. And it just, when you were sharing just, so many aha moments, right? Throughout when you said like, soon it'll be my turn, right? And like just that countdown that our mind goes through. For me, what changed everything, we were sitting in the same meeting together out in Kelowna when someone explained powerlessness as it does not matter how much I love my family. I go to the ends of the earth for them. There's nothing that I wouldn't do, but they are not enough to keep me from picking up. And like, I'm sure I'd heard that millions of times over the years. But in that moment, probably because I was so ready to receive it, right? It just struck a chord in me. And it was like, yeah, I love my family. I love my niece and nephew. I love my sister. I love my mom. I love my partner. I love my friends, everyone, right? But they will not be enough to keep me from going back to my addiction. Like, just because I love them isn't going to keep me sober, right? Because
Exactly.
it has a bigger hold on me. My addiction will outweigh love, right? That's why my higher power comes in and restores that love.
Yep.
And I used to hate hearing that because I thought, oh my gosh, like I would never do anything to hurt my family. And no, it's not intentional, right? I just really do not have a choice. Like, let's go, let's go to a bar right now. We have a few drinks. You know what I mean? Your wife calls, my sister calls or whatnot, right? Do we know we should take those calls? Yeah. Are we hitting end because we've got a round of shots coming?
Our phone
Probably
is
yes.
off. I shut both our phones off at the whole start of that. Like,
But you know what I mean?
I'm
Like that.
scolding you for leaving your ringer on right now. No.
But exactly, right?
Yeah.
But we wouldn't understand that, right? They'd be like, oh, I gotta go, let's get the bill. That
Yeah.
doesn't even enter the chat for us. That's how
Yeah.
far off it is. And that's
Gosh,
how
that
it's
just took
like,
me back to so many moments, even right there.
right?
Yeah.
And when my
And
sponsees, I say, like, the love, you love your boyfriend very much, but when you're off to the races, that's not going to be enough to keep you clean. Just won't be, right?
mm,
If it was, we wouldn't need this program.
I have to be brimming full of recovery myself, which is part of why I'm relishing in the fact that I have recovery fever. Like I'm burning up with the love of recovery, and nothing's putting that fire out right now. Why?
Mm.
Because I'm somewhere that is keeping me far from the edge. Like I'm just keeping myself in the middle of it. And when I do, I'm finding more happiness, more joy, more serenity, less risks, Like I just last year when I came out of options, I had to go and butcher pigs right away, like right from options. And my wife and the other wives of the people that were there, they got the guys to not drink at all. But this year they were drinking. And it was like, I was so fucking proud. First of all, I didn't experience one desire to drink. Second of all, like, I like didn't resent them for drinking. And third of all, like I was just at peace with it all. Like those, like the whole situation. And that would have been 4 days of mental cycling torture, resentment. And it was just like, I was actually totally stoked. I was like, they're them, I'm me. You know, do I like to go out to bars and be inside a big drunk crowd? No. These guys were not like super drunkards. They were getting buzzed by the end of it, yes. And they were drinking all day. Like they were starting in the morning. Like it's not a fun job. Well, like it's a fun job in the sense that we're all together, but it's not a fun job physically. You know, you're standing on a concrete floor, you're lifting huge pieces of meat, and you know, you're running a knife that could chop your fingers off if you look away for 1 second. So um, it's a bit dangerous and hard, but the camaraderie and the combined goal of getting that done together, and that not to be an issue for me, Shannon, I never thought I'd experience a day like that ever.
That's such huge growth, and that's so amazing because this, as we go in the holiday season too, right? Like this time last year, look, we're both fresh out of treatment and, we got a year under our belt
Mm.
with no desire to go back. And that's such a gift too.
And that's, you know, like another element of that powerlessness is somebody thinking that they got enough recovery. You know, like they're like, whoa, I'm good now. You know, like I'm going to cut my meetings down. You know, I don't need to sponsor someone. You know, there's just
Look,
elements of,
I can't go to the gym once a month, eat whatever I want and expect to
yeah.
stay in shape. Doesn't work that way, right? For the real deal.
And
And that's us, is it's contingent on a daily maintenance of our spiritual condition, right? And
mhm,
I got to do these small little things each day. And I want to do them now. That's the difference, right? I don't overcomplicate this stuff anymore. And I don't think of like, oh, I have to pray, I have to meditate, I have to go to meetings to do this. Like,
I
it,
get to.
I get to, and it does sound at first like a daunting list, but daunting's trying to get a hold of a dealer at 3 in the morning. You know what I mean? During a snowstorm. This is easy.
Yep, absolutely. Do you got another question you want to ask?
I love how you explained that. I think that was beautiful. So, no, we can move on to the next part of step one you want to speak on.
Okay. Let's see. How does acceptance of reality play a part of step one?
So, I heard a speaker say this a long time ago. I live by these words. I shared this with my sponsees. I share it sometimes when I speak. In a nutshell, my disease looks like this. I've got a body that can't process alcohol and drugs and a mind that can't process reality, right? Meaning that even my best thinking in a diseased brain will lead me right back to that substance. So today, my acceptance of reality is that maybe what I'm feeling inward isn't necessarily the outward reality. We've talked about this before. And my reality is till the day that I die, I am going to be an alcoholic, right? I get to choose though whether I am an alcoholic in the throes of alcoholism or I'm an alcoholic basking in the glow of recovery. That's my reality today, right? I choose with the help of my higher power to be living a solution-based life, which is composed of several different things, right? But to me, I've accepted this is my lot in life. It's not that bad of a gig, ultimately, when I look around and see what I have. So yeah, it just practicing that acceptance of, hey, I can do anything I want to do, I just can't drink or get high. Cool. But,
Nicely put. But
but yeah, all these other things I get to do when I am sick, when I am letting my disease run the show, right? All these other things don't matter. The only thing I want to do is the one I can't. So, in order to stay in that solution, that's why I got to work with others, got to practice these steps, got to work with my sponsor, got to carry the message like we're doing today. And I need to rely on my higher power and I need to ask for help. Point blank, period.
boom.
Boom.
Boom. I love it. And for me, the acceptance of reality didn't come until I could see reality. And so, uh, that's where I implore people to get all the way through their steps. Um, I could not have had the realizations about how deep my delusions were until I got to step 4 to 6. Like I didn't have the tools from life to accurately see how I was filtering, how my water wasn't clear, and how I was reflecting things back. And that, there was somebody who said it in a meeting, and I'm not sure if I agree entirely, but there's something to it that my brain won't let it go. It said the opposite of expectations are reality. And I, there's something there, and I'm like, it needs a little tweaking, but it's almost perfect, you know. And my expectations that I was a normal person, were part of a reality that I wasn't accepting. My expectations that I should be able to control this were part of a reality that I wasn't accepting. My expectation that things would change after breaks was something that just baffled me.
Mhm.
Like there was some long breaks. Like I took 20 months off at one point, and it was just like wham. Like I remember at one point quitting one substance, and it had gotten to a point where no fun anymore. And it was about 6 months later. I was like, oh, okay, this will be like a fun thing. Like, because it's been 6 months. Maybe my endorphins have come back. I'm ready. And it was like, thunk, thunk, right back to not fun. And I was like, oh my God, like, have I ruined myself forever? And in certain ways, there's no rewinding that sensation tape right to the start. Like it's never going to be that night of senseless giggles like you were a teenager. Like it just never goes all the way back to there. And it can go to like a mildly not bad and then ending that bender bad. But for me, that was something that I bumped my head against that expectation so many times, and I would not accept the reality that it couldn't be fun again or that I couldn't have control.
No, and like you said, you go back to, oh, I want it to be fun again, right? I'm gonna somehow recreate that. Then that doesn't happen. So then you get a little bit more understanding of the fact that maybe it's not going to be like that, but it could still be a good version, right? And as it progresses, then it gets to a point where it's never that way and you just don't care anymore, right? Whatever it's going to be is what it's going to be. You just need to be using. Um, and I think there's nothing wrong with having expectations. Like you hear quotes and stuff like, oh, if you have expectations of people, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment or whatnot. There are some expectations that are healthy and normal to have, right? If I have my money with a bank and I go to the debit machine, I put my card in and take money out, I expect to get that money out because I've invested that money with that bank, right? Like that's a realistic expectation. However, going out and drinking to oblivion and expecting that there's going to be no consequences with that and everything's going to be fine and I haven't caused any damage, or I'm going to be able to wake up the next day bright eyed and bushy tailed and go to work, that is a delusion, right? So, those are the kind of expectations that we have of ourselves that are never realistic, and of others too, that people are just going to accept and, be encouraging of a habit that's killing me.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got one more question here, but do you have any left?
Well, I like that we're both sharing on
Yeah,
this too,
yeah,
right? So what I did
absolutely.
want to talk about with you, we've already covered. So I think we're doing good.
Okay, so Now, this relates to a constant reminding, which I believe occurs when you're working with a sponsee, but I believe it also, I get reminded of this the most from meetings, actually. Why addicts need to be reminded of powerlessness, and it's, with the addiction in the closet doing push-ups analogy, right? What does that make you think of? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, why do we need that constant reminder that it's never going to be the same, right?
Hmm.
Because in an alcoholic or addict brain, we can't remember how bad things were. We just don't, right? That's why it's insane to the outside world. But to us, it's like you can have a brutal night, wake up the next day, the second day, whatnot, and you're like, whoa, what did I do last night? I'm never doing this again. Just like get me through this. Let me make some amends here, get some people off my back, and I'm never going back that hard again. 48 hours later, 72, a week later, whatever your cup of tea is, you've forgotten about the pain and suffering of that and you're right back at the races, right? Our brain will downplay what we should be remembering in impact and like what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. Downplay things that should be a big deal, and it will also make things that are a small deal a much bigger deal, right? It's opposite than that of your normal functioning non-addict brain. So I need those reminders because if not, as time stretches on, I'll start to think maybe it wasn't that bad and maybe this time can be different.
I agree with that so much. And for myself, I feel like I did so much brain damage through the process of my addiction that my memory really is depleted. Like when it came time to do my amends inside the steps, I was like, man, I don't even know half the shit I did. Like the only blackout nights that you feel bad about are the ones that probably people have reminded you of shit you did that hurt them. And you,
100%.
like, how many nights did you ruin other people's lives that you can't even remember? Like that. For me, it's like I'm sitting in a meeting and I see like the hot mess roll into the meeting, and it's like their first or second day, and they're sweaty and fidgety, and they're just like, no solutions. And I'm like, oh God. I'm like, I am so far from there right now. And like, and then that brings like a joy, like not like a nana nana nana, I'm so far ahead of you. It's like, wow, I've done a lot of work here, and I don't have to be there anymore if I just keep doing this work. Like the reality is that never had they seen someone who thoroughly follows this program. And as long as I keep being thorough, then I feel that I have nothing to fear, because it is a consequence of the actions of working the program that keep me straight. And I'm not saying that there's nothing that can knock me off the horse, but what I'm saying is that I truly believe that if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm recovering. You remember Jessie from the Monday night meeting. I'm going to have her on, and she is a big advocate that we do recover. Like you don't need to obsessively have thoughts about alcohol or drugs for the rest of your life. If you're working a program, those actually do start to fade or become completely non existent. But does that mean you can stop your program? No, like she just celebrated her 16 year this year, and she goes to meetings all the time. Why? Because the program is working.
Because she's not arrogant enough in her disease, right, to think that it can't come back. And that's
Mm.
our ego, right? That tells us I don't need to be doing as much as I once was because look at all this time I have. Like we've forgotten that the reason we get that time is because of the work that we've done, right? Because we do recover, but we can get right back to being sick again if we let up on the gas of doing the things we need to do to live in the solution. So I love that, I believe that we don't have to be, victims to our disease for the rest of our life. We do need to do the things that we need to do each day to keep us moving forward, not regressing.
Exactly. And it's only, like they say progress, not perfection. But then if you read the 12 by 12, it's like, woo, let's slightly correct that. Progress towards perfection. We don't want to progress aimlessly downward. And we don't want to progress like flatlining. Like we
No, and
do want to be trying to get better all the time.
I'm not using that as an excuse for shitty behavior either. Oh, well, progress, not perfection, No, I'm striving to be the best version of me I can be each day with the guidance of God, right? And being like here to be just be of service, not to be served, right? And giving back. And that's really what it's all about. So yeah, I love that. I do have a question for you, what we just talked
Okay.
about too. So you and I are going into our second year, right? The
Okay.
first year of recovery, we're now going in our second.
Mm-hmm.
That was in the past for me where it really started to become a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that differently. I say that be for those of you listening that don't really understand what I'm saying is in the first year, you're just so grateful to not have to go back to the drinking
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Yeah.
right? And it's a whole new way of living and you're going through the steps and it's very exciting time and you've got a lot of support around you and you get this 1 year and it's like, yay. And then the reality sets in that now this is going to be a day by day thing, day to day thing for the rest of your
Mm.
life. So being in this season now where um, this is a lifestyle for us. What are some goals you have in your recovery in the second year for yourself?
So okay, well, whether anybody out there or not thinks of this as recovery or not, I do think that there is a fair amount of my recovery wrapped up inside this podcast right now. I do feel that I'm helping the hosts, myself, some audience members, and other people get more of a glimpse of recovery and hear some honesty outside the rooms. Whether that's 100% approved of by anybody or not, that's not my issue. But my issue is that I directly have had some people say, "Hey, this is really helping my life." And I've seen it. I've seen like people experiencing things and and growth, and even inside the meeting or like, sorry, the episode itself. So part of my goal is to grow inside this. I want to, maintain a continual flow of sponsees. I got up to five, and there's a couple that are, maybe not super committed right now at this point, and I feel happy with like three active sponsees. I feel like, like that's a manageable quantity. I may go up or down on that number, but that's something that I want. Like I have my tattoo of acceptance, where I can readily see it. My lifelong goal is to learn acceptance. That's like my purpose in life right now as a human being is to go in that direction. So that's something that I want to continue working on. I'm going to the World AA convention in Vancouver this summer. I have tickets to that. Uh, I am I will be attending meetings every single day that I'm not doing a morning podcast. So this is my morning meeting right now because the meeting really is defined by two addicts getting together talking about recovery. And that's what this is. And so that does not diminish my recovery to do this. It just alters how it is. And I feel like in some ways, I can get deeper in my understanding of the program inside one of these intimate settings than necessarily like not like I just feel like there's more focus here. And when we get to ask questions back and forth, it takes things deeper, and I'm always leaving these with some kind of understanding that I didn't have beforehand. And then I'm also really starting to implement the meditation thing. Like we did a little meditation before we started this, and I've been trying to do that with the various co-hosts. And then as well, I'm hoping that I'm able to write 1,000 songs next year too. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And back at you.
Um, get more diligent and improve in my physical health too, right? Um, my recovery is very strong right now. I want to continue that, right? Continuing to sponsor, continuing to grow in my closeness to my creator too. But yeah, I do want to get on a more diligent health plan physically, which I look forward to, and I've already kind of started. Continue to carry the message. I want to, um, I've been speaking a lot lately and getting a lot out of that. So I want to continue carrying the message in treatment centers and detox stuff to um, grow and blossom in my career too, in this new endeavor that I'm doing. And yeah, just really be the best me I can be, in all levels, right? Show up for my family, continue to grow my relationship, people around me. And I'm working even more on boundaries too. So less toxicity in my life, getting rid of narcissistic friendships that needed to go, and just having a stronger, smaller, healthier circle around me too, because we really are the company that we keep, right? And um yeah, I just want to have a healthy circle around me, healthy bodily, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally.
And I hope that 1 year from now, we're 52 episodes together ahead on this.
That it would be a true gift. I love doing this podcast with you, and I'm looking forward to continuing on this journey too. I'm learning a lot, and I know we're helping others too, right? Just even the feedback that I got. And I love doing this alongside you because you give me different ways to look at things. And yeah, we're kindred spirits, and I appreciate everything that you contribute.
And I feel that in some way, doing this podcast, I know that some people might take this as a pride thing, but I don't. Is that doing this podcast is a little bit of a way of making amends. Maybe for all the people I took down a shitty road for a long time. If I can maybe, just help a couple people out there through this, then, somehow it feels like some kind of living amends to me. Anyway.
So beautiful.
Well, I think that was an amazing start to our series. This was our step one series. I want to thank you for being willing to come back. And, I'm looking forward to a ton of episodes together, Shannon. I think that both of us can have great conversations about recovery like we always have. And now even kind of topicifying it is another level that I'm enjoying because like we've always had great conversations, but now with the topic, I feel that we can even take it up a notch, and I'm looking forward to doing so together.
Me too. Thank you so much.
So if you've liked what you've seen, please subscribe, share, and like this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. The more people that see it, the more people that can be helped by it. We're looking for interaction with our audience, so please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you. We're hoping to create slideshows of the Freedom Rising in your lives. Please send any photos of you flourishing in your life as a result of your recovery. Tune in next episode for more recovery fun. Bye bye, everybody. I love you so much.
Thank you.